Hello, I'm Teresa Crabtree, and I'm the creator of the SoulCleanse, which is a powerful method of releasing non beneficial energies and dark entities. And about a year ago, said a prayer. I was wanting to know how I could help my clients more. These demons seem to be getting stronger, and it's getting harder to get them off of people. And I had an immediate response. When I woke up the next morning, there was an email that sent me to this book. I ended up reading other books, and I started watching videos on deliverance ministry, which is also known as exorcism. And one thing that I kept repeatedly seeing is that these demons would manifest through people. They would actually talk through the people. And when the name Jesus was invoked, they'd start cowering, they would start yelling, they would start screaming. But what really interested me was they started whining and their powers were taken away. And some of them were saying, my powers, where are they? You can't take me to the again. You can't do this to me, whatever. They knew Jesus had the authority to cast them out, and they were being cast out. So I'm like, I think I want to know a little bit more about Jesus. Now, I had been in the church over 30 years ago, and I was raised in the Catholic Church as well. So I knew who Jesus was, and I always had a love and an affinity towards Jesus, but never really studied Jesus, knew Jesus, or really knew who he was, what his powers were. So I ended up buying a Bible, and I started doing some studies. And the first thing that I studied was, who is Jesus? So I found that there's over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament that Jesus fulfilled. These are prophecies for the Messiah that was to come, written hundreds of years before Jesus was born. And that blew me away. So I did a study on that, and that's on my website and on my videos on the YouTube channel. And that led me to do a couple other studies. And then I wanted to know more about demons. What does the Bible say about demons? So that leads us to today, this whole study on demonology. Now, this is going to be several videos on this series, but I'm going to be using one main document as an outline that has all the information. And I highly encourage you to go to my website at teresacrabtree.com, and you can go to either to the bottom or at the top. At the top, you can hit Bible studies, and it'll take you to a page where it has the Messiah one I did and all the other ones that I'm creating, these videos and the documents. And you can also go to the bottom, and then you can click on Demonology, Biblical Perspective, and that'll bring up this 38-page document. And that's what we're going to start going over today. I want to introduce you to that, and we're going to look through first the document itself so you can get a basic idea of what all these videos are going to be about. And then we'll start with the first study, which will be looking at some of the definitions that are related to demonology. All right, so let's get started. I do want to say right up front, I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm just somebody that's deeply interested in this. And now I am hooked on the Bible because of these prophecies being fulfilled, not only for Messiah, but also other prophecies that were fulfilled. And then like 200 years later, they're fulfilled. And all the archaeology that's proving this stuff is true. So it's very amazing. But what's really amazing is the prophecies for the end times, the end of the world. That stuff is happening now. I'm reading these prophecies here in the Bible, and it's like having a newspaper in my other hand because the stuff is happening right now. It's just absolutely amazing. So anyway, all right, so I'm going to run you through the whole document now. I'll just hit some of the highlights so you can see what's coming in the future videos, and then also how the whole document is laid out so that you can find what you need. All right, so we're going to come back in a few minutes. First part is going to introduce you to the definition of the terms. That's how these are all written up, these different terms that are used. And first is I have it broken up into the Old Testament and then into the New Testament. One thing that's interesting to note right up front is with these Old Testament definitions, the words, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 terms there. When you look at the New Testament, there's 21 of them. Now, I was looking for all the words that had to do with the demonology. Now, I want to show you something real quick here. If you're not familiar with the Bible. All right, here's the Bible. This is the Old Testament. So look how big this is. It's thick. There's a whole lot of information in there. But I only found 7 different terms that are in the Old Testament, that whole part. But in this part, which is a lot skinnier, demonology is talked about 21 times. There's 21 major terms in there. So there's a lot more talk about demonology in the New Testament than the Old Testament. So that was one of the things I discovered right up front. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. All right, so we're going to talk about today's video. The part one is going to be about the Old Testament, just the introduction, overall introduction, and then we're going to talk about the definitions in the Old Testament, and then in the next video, part two, then we're going to talk about the New Testament terms that are used, and then starting on the third video, we're going to start talking about all of this. These are the scriptures themselves. So we're going to start off with the angelic rebellion against God, where all this evil started, and the human rebellion against God. And then I have a section on Lucifer. I found something very interesting about that I didn't know. So I'm going to talk about that. That'll be probably about the fourth video or such. Idolatry, I thought was very interesting. There were hundreds of Bible references to idolatry. This is something God did not like, and there were reasons. We're going to talk about some of those as we go, but he did not like it. And it's a huge theme in the Old Testament where God wanted us to stay away from idol worship and a lot of the occult practices and all. And I used to think God was really punitive, and why is he picky about this and that, and says he's a jealous God, but that didn't ring true to me. What's he jealous of? He's the one who created everything. It's there to be. I don't get jealous of people. Why would God get jealous of people? But God also knew that these idols that everybody was worshiping, they're he calls them sticks sometimes. It's just a stick if you have a statue or such like that. But also, what you're really calling on instead of gods, or you're calling on demons. And he knows what happens when people start falling away from God and start worshiping demons. So it's not pretty. You can just look around and you'll know that we're in a mess down here because we don't listen. All right. So then there's a section on Satan. This one's kind of short because Satan's not talked about too much in the Old Testament, but talked about a lot more in the New Testament. And then a section, we're going to talk about those in a little bit, about Behemoth and Leviathan. So they have their own little section. And then we'll get into the New Testament scriptures and the different topics there. Everything's kind of categorized in subsections to make it easier to find. Now, Jesus cast out a lot of demons, so we're going to be looking at that. Jesus had three main goals when he came down here, three main things that he did. He cast out demons, he healed the sick, and he also was talking about the way, the truth, and the life. He's trying to get people to get back to God. And there is even a Bible verse where he says he came here to take care of the demons. He's got superiority over them. He wants to show us about them, teach us about them, so that we don't fall into their traps. All right, so there's quite a few here. Actually, Jesus casting out demons. And then there's a lot of teachings of Jesus related to demons. So we're going to look at those in a different video. And then Jesus sends his disciples out to preach, to heal, and to cast out demons. Same thing that he was doing. He was teaching them, and we'll learn about their experiences with that. And then the Last Supper, where he was betrayed by Judas. He says that Satan came into Judas. How did that happen? It's one of the 12 disciples. How did Satan get into him? When he's hanging around and he's out there casting out demons, and he's hanging out with Jesus, how did this happen? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll look at a beautiful prayer that Jesus prays over his disciples. This is right before he was going into that last horrible time of his life, and right before his crucifixion. And he prays for his disciples, and that prayer is relevant to you and to me as well. Then we're going to look at the Acts of the Apostles. This is an actual book in the Bible called the Acts of the Apostles, and these are things that happened to the apostles after Jesus died, when they were carrying on the work. So I pulled out ones that have to do with our study of demonology. So this one here is a good one to read. If you're ever thinking about casting demons out of people and you haven't been trained and you don't know what you're doing, you might want to read Acts, 19, 11 to 17 right here. Exorcist attacked by evil spirits. Exorcism gone wrong. Exorcism gone bad. Right? Then we'll take a look at the epistles. The epistles are actual letters that were written by different people in the Bible after Jesus' death. And we're going to look at the ones that had to do specifically with talking about demons. And then there's the armor of God in Ephesians 6. This is a really important one for everybody. This helps you to know what you need to do to be grounded so that you can fight against the devil. We are in a spiritual battle between good and evil. That's what this is all about when you look at all the craziness in the world. And every demon, whether you believe in them or not, they believe in you and they're after you. They want to pull you away from God and pull you down with them. And they're doing a really good job of it. You got that armor on, you'll know how to protect yourself. All right, then we get into the book of Revelation. This is the last book of the Bible. It's all about prophecies of the end times, and it begins with some letters to the churches. And so we'll look at there's 7 churches that letters are written to, but only a few of them, they actually mention anything about demons. So I'll put those in there. And then we'll get into the end time prophecies. I won't go real deep into these because that's a whole study in its own, and it's fascinating. And what's interesting with the book of Revelation, it's the only book in the Bible. There's 66 books in the Bible. Revelation is the only book that says if you read this Bible, you study it, and you live it, then you will get an extra blessing on that. So if you want an extra blessing from God besides whatever you're already going to earn, study that book. It's really important right now. All right, so that's the end of that, really. And it comes down to, we'll talk about Satan's when he got bound for 1,000 years and he's let loose for a little bit, and then what happens with the final judgment. And the final judgment is not just about Satan; it's also the final judgment for humans. It's both. So, all right, so let's get started here with today's lesson. Again, you can download this documented at the bottom of my website or at the top by going to the Bible Studies page. And the videos are on my YouTube channel. And sign up for my YouTube channel too so that you'll know whenever I have new videos coming out. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the terms that are actually used, the ones that I looked up, referencing demonology. So the first thing to note is the Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew and the Aramaic languages, and the New Testament was written in the Greek language. And translating these ancient works into various languages has been ongoing for centuries. And currently, there are over 450 translations just in the English language. And you can find the Bible now on apps and stuff on your computer or your phone in almost every language. The goal is for it to be in every language because that's one part of the end time prophecies is once the Bible, the Jesus message is said to all the world, that's part of what's going to bring on the end of the world. So there's people that are out there that are fulfilling that. And so there's so many different translations. But over time, the words and the concepts can be misinterpreted, especially due to unknown cultural usages at the time the passage was written, colloquialism, idioms, and such. And these factors, among others, create some difficulty when you're doing a study on specific words, especially because you have the 3 languages to look at as well, the original Hebrew, the original Aramaic, and the original Greek. So it can get very tricky from one translation to another. And one thing that happens a lot too is one translation might use the word demon, where the others may use the term devil or unclean spirit. So there's a lot of overlap depending on which translation that you're using. And so I try to keep that to a minimum as much as I could so we don't have the same words showing up, same Bible verses for just using different words. So it's pretty tricky. And the definitions are separated into 2 main sections, the Old Testament and then the New Testament. And within each of the 2 sections, the words are organized alphabetically. And each word is followed by the transliteration from the original language. That's how to pronounce it in English. So down here we have Baal-Zebub. This would tell us how to pronounce it. And then we have the phonetic spelling that's in parentheses. And then next is the word origin and the meaning, followed by a brief summary of the word usage and the cultural and historical background of the word. And these definitions rely heavily on information that I got from Strong's Concordance. Then I have included all the Bible verses for each word. So down here we have Baal-Zebub. There's only mentioned once in the New Testament. So this is where you would find the actual scripture where it mentions that specific word. Now, when appropriate, then I've included a note cross-referencing the same or similar words when they're found in both of the Testaments. For example, down here at Baal-Zebub, the actual word shows up again in the New Testament. So it'll be down here in the New Testament definitions. Now, Baal-Zebub itself, this is kind of funny, I thought. It's derived from two words, Baal, which means Lord or master, and Zebub, meaning fly. So it's often translated as Lord of the Flies. Now, they think the name is derogatory. The actual word for this is a god, a false idol from the Philistines, which is the Gaza area and that whole Canaan area. You may hear him as Baal. A lot of people call him Baal, Baal, whatever. So there's different ways of pronouncing it. But his original name is Baal-Zebub, which means Lord of the High Place. And he would be Lord of the High Place because back in the ancient times, they would build their altars up on high places, up on the top of the mountains and all, so that they could be closer to God. That's where they would burn their sacrifices and do all their things. But now Baal-Zebub is a particularly nasty god. This one's associated with human sacrifice, especially babies. They offered these babies live, and I won't go into how they did it and what they did. It was pretty gruesome. And so this false God doesn't want anything to do with idolatry and these false gods anyway, but this particular false god was especially repugnant to God because it's killing their life, human sacrifices, babies. Not only babies, but babies. So with that understanding, you can see how this could have happened where Baal-Zebub is by the Jewish people would be called Baal-Zebub. So instead of Lord of the High Place, it's Lord of the Flies. And you can get your own imagination going why there would be flies. So we'll just stop there. It's pretty gruesome. And I have a section. Well, I already talked about that. Never mind. Behemoth. This one is again only found one time in the Book of Job in the Old Testament. And there is a section. I'm not going to talk about him now. There is a section that we're going to talk about him and Leviathan because they come together both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And then you can also to find out more. Look at in the New Testament definitions. You can go down to beast from the sea, and beast of the earth. There's more information there. And the word demon itself in the Old Testament, I thought this was interesting too. Demons only found 2 times in the Old Testament. And in both cases, it's talking about false gods being demons. But in the New Testament, demons talked about in over 30 verses. So it's quite a difference. Again, when you consider the size, 2 in the Old Testament and 30-some in the New Testament. I think it's closer to 40, actually. It's kind of interesting. So we're going to talk a bit about some of the different cultural changes that have happened. So Psalm 16 is one of the places, one of the 2 where demon shows up in the Old Testament. And this Psalm 106 talks about a recurring theme that happens throughout the Bible. Humans follow their own will instead of God's will. God punishes them in hopes that they'll wake up and they'll turn away from the demonic influences, and the people see their mistakes and they repent and then they love God again, and then the cycle repeats over and over again. And apparently this cycle is not going to end until the end of time here. So down in the New Testament, you'll be able to compare, because the word demon is also used in the New Testament as well as demon possessed. Then there's Leviathan. This is another interesting one. Leviathan, the word means to twist or to coil. So think about a snake. It's always associated with a snake, Leviathan. And in the ancient Near Eastern mythology, these creatures were similar to Leviathan, were often described as primordial sea monsters, representing chaos and disorder. In the biblical, Leviathan is portrayed as a powerful and destructive creature that only God has control over, and this emphasizes his sovereignty over all of his creations. And this reflects a common theme in the Old Testament where God demonstrates the power over everything, the natural world as well as the demonic realm and the angelic realm, the good angels. And I have a whole section that we're going to be talking about Behemoth and Leviathan. And you can also, with Leviathan, you can go down to the word, it's also dragon in the, not serpent. In the Old Testament's more like a serpent, where in Leviathan he shows up as a dragon in Revelation, and also the beast from the sea. And a lot of people believe that these are the same creatures. And they may or may not even be, they may be mythological, but they're representative of the same thing, which is evil. So it's pretty interesting. Lucifer, I had a big surprise when I read this, and I'm not going to share it right now. You're going to have to either read it for yourself or watch it in a future video. But I did have a surprise from that because I found out the word Lucifer isn't in the Bible. So how did Satan get to be called Lucifer? How do we know that's his original name? So the answer might surprise you. It surprised me, and we'll talk about that later. Cliffhanger. All right, in the Old Testament, the word Satan shows up, and they pronounce it Satan, and it means to oppose or to act as an adversary. And the term is used both as a common noun for any kind of adversary, such as an enemy. And it also shows up as a proper noun referring specifically to the specific entity known as Satan. So it shows up as his name. And down in the New Testament, similar words are used: accuser, devil, enemy, and Satan. They're all used. And then we have the section specifically for Satan as well that we'll be looking at later, or you can download and read before then. Then the word Sheol. Sheol refers to the realm of the dead. These are the human dead. And I thought it was interesting. Sheol means to ask or to inquire. So if you're hanging out in a place where you go after you're dead, what are you asking? What are you inquiring about? I thought that was interesting. I want to do more on that at some other time, I think. But it's often depicted as a shadowy underworld, a temporary place for all of the dead, regardless of their moral standing during life. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, all humans, when they die, they go to this place of Sheol. And it's considered a neutral place where everyone's waiting for their final destiny. And the understanding of Sheol over time, especially in the 400 years between when the Old Testament was written and the New Testament was written, the understanding of Sheol seemed to change quite a bit. And that came about partly because of different studies that come in. Sometimes people pick up a belief from a different religion and stuff. So these ideas of resurrection, final judgment, heaven and hell started coming in, and they're showing up. And that's a lot of the reason why the word demon doesn't show up as much and even talked about so much in the Old Testament, but it is in the New Testament because the times have changed. These demons are always there, and so people have always been getting rid of these demons, casting them out and having problems with them, but things change over time. So although Sheol is found 66 times in the Old Testament, only one, Isaiah 14, uses it in the context of demonology. And in that verse, he says that Satan will be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest part of the pit. And in the New Testament, they don't use the word pit, they use the word abyss. So if you have ever had work with me and you'll be familiar with this term abyss or the term pit, because that's where we send any demons that we are taking off of ourselves. Our last term today is serpent. The root word in the Old Testament means to practice divination or to observe signs, and it primarily refers to a serpent or a snake. And the term carries connotations of enchantment, divination, and having mystical powers due to that root word. In the biblical context, the serpent is most famously known for its role in the Garden of Eden, where it tempts Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. And this narrative has shaped the serpent's symbolic association with Satan and evil in the Judeo-Christian thought, right from the first book of the Bible in Genesis all the way to the end in the book of Revelation. The battle between good and evil is a main theme in the Bible. And you can learn more about that story down in those sections with the angelic and the human rebellion against God sections below. You can also look at the serpent in the Greek equivalation down in the New Testament definitions. So I hope you found this to be of interest, and I hope you come back, and I hope you do download this at the Teresa Crabtree at the bottom of my website. Click on the link Demonology, a Biblical Perspective. And also you can reach it and all the videos as they're completed on my the top going to Bible studies in my menu at my website. So I do hope that you enjoy this, that you read it, that you share it with others, and that you study it. And then I hope this also gives you an interest in looking at the Bible and other topics. There's not one topic that pertains to us, even in modern days, that's not talked about in the Bible in some form or another. So I encourage you to read the Bible and learn more yourself. And hopefully you can do like I did and catch on fire and just really get interested in it and getting to know God better and to get to know Jesus better. Who is Jesus? What was his role? What can he help you? And if you have problems with demons, you definitely want Jesus on your side. He's the one that has the authority over demons and they know it. So on that note, I wish you blessings and hope you have a great day and hope to see you in a future video.